The once dashing young king has changed life in England forever. The age-old monasteries have been disbanded. The population's religion and spiritual life has been forced to change over time. King Henry VIII is aging and his stomach is bulging out of his breeches. With his age, his temper and patience have worn thin. The young dashing king is no longer. Time, indulgence, injury, and frustration have turned this king into a tyrant. Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm of course the Knight of History. Thank you so much for tuning in. And this is of course part number 5 of Henry VIII and the Reformation story. Today we will discuss how Henry VIII became a tyrant. If you're watching, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And of course the charity donation link for Mercy Ships is still active, so go ahead and find it in the description down below. Now let's go ahead and get straight into this. Henry VIII had done away with his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and now he had a new wife, Anne Boleyn. But her intelligence and independence, which originally delighted Henry when he first met her, now infuriated him when he was married to her. Henry longed for a son. When Anne finally fell pregnant, he had her coronated as the queen, and 3 months later she gave birth in September 1533. But the child was a girl, Elizabeth. Henry was so disappointed that he had another girl and not a boy that he even refused to go to his own child's christening. Back then it was thought that the female decided the gender of the child, which is of course absolute hogwash. It's not true. But Anne and the courts didn't know that. Anne went on to miscarry for another 3 terms. She lost 3 more children. Henry's disdain for his wife now increased. After around 3 years of marriage, Anne was charged with multiple cases of adultery and treason, even though this is almost certainly not true, as she was innocent. In May 1536, Anne's accused lovers were executed. Then famously, she too was executed. 1 year later, Henry became engaged to his 3rd wife, Jane Seymour, and Henry absolutely adored her. She was well-mannered, intelligent, affectionate. She was the absolute pinnacle of the high society. In 1537, she had a child, the child that Henry had always wanted, a son. They named him Edward. Jane, however, died soon after Edward's birth. Henry went on to have 3 more wives, but he would have no more children. In 1540, he married Anne of Cleves, but Henry wasn't attracted to her. He said that she looked like a Flanders mare, liking her to a horse. They divorced after 6 months. Later that year, he married Catherine Howard, but she too was accused of adultery and promptly beheaded in 1541. Finally, in 1543, he married his last wife, Catherine Parr, who acted as the stepmother to the 3 children of the ailing king. But before Henry VIII was ailing and an old man and overweight, he was super active. During jousting tournaments at Greenwich Palace in 1536, Henry was actually knocked off his horse, but he was crushed beneath it. He suffered several injuries, including an open wound that would not heal. He was unable to exercise, which meant that he grew enormously fat and developed a 54-inch waist. He was also arthritic and had painful ulcers in his stomach, and by the end of his life he was so overweight that he could not even walk, and he had to be wheeled around in an early version of a wheelchair. During this period, Henry actually turned against Protestant ideas and in fact put the English Reformation into reverse. In 1539, Parliament passed 6 articles reassessing Catholic doctrines such as the celibacy of priests and transubstantiation, the changing of bread into the body of Christ. A year later, he had his chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, beheaded for his Protestant sympathies and for organizing Henry's failed marriage to Anne of Cleves. Henry was becoming increasingly tyrannical. In fact, between 1532 and 1540, he had 330 people executed, including his wives, Protestants were burnt at the stakes, murderers who used poison were boiled to death, Catholics were hung, drawn and quartered, and the king's relatives were beheaded for being potential rivals to the king's authority and his throne. The ailing king Henry finally died on the 28th of January 1547. He was only 55 years old, but ironically, the king who had established the Church of England demanded that his funeral be a full Catholic service, complete with incense and Latin chanting. By the end of his long and extremely eventful reign, the king had invaded France 3 times, married 6 different wives, executed a Lord Chancellor and a Chief Minister. He amassed 55 royal palaces, founded the Royal Navy, made himself King of Ireland, and established the Church of England. But most importantly, he left 3 children, all of whom would have their own stint on the throne of England. Henry's son, Edward, became Edward the Sixth as he became king. He was, of course, just 9 years old and would be known as the Boy King. He was smart and a far stronger believer in the Reformation compared to his father. Henry VIII had started the English Reformation, but throughout his reign, the Church of England remained mainly Catholic. They simply did not recognize the Pope's authority in Rome. Henry VI passed further Protestant reforms to the Church of England, such as priests being able to marry, Catholic Mass being abolished, and the services needed to be compulsorily done in English. He also authorized the first English prayer book. This was really the end of the old faith in England. Edward was advised by his uncle, the Duke of Somerset, and the strongly Protestant Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer. Any of the remaining Catholic features were removed from the English churches. Altars, hanging crucifixes, shrines, artworks, and statues were all burned down. Then the stained glass windows were smashed. The frescoes and murals were unfortunately whitewashed. Catholic rituals and ceremonies such as Corpus Christi were in fact banned. For most of the poor illiterate population, these colourful practices were in fact the fundamental parts to their faith, and from on which they would be deprived of this religion that they began to know and love throughout their life. Unfortunately for Edward, he actually died very young, at the age of 15, after being covered in sores and coughing up blood. He was unmarried, childless. Henry VIII's fears of an unstable throne with no heirs therefore became a reality. Thank you so much for watching. Please do go like, comment and subscribe, and if you can, go donate to the charity Mercy Ships in the description down below. Thank you. The more you know.